Okay, so what happened here is we found that the groove that is in the side of this sight leaf was, I guess the solder had come down into it because of that block of wood that we had in there. It was too small to fit the cam. So we took a small file and got in that groove and cleaned it out so that the little cam here can fit. I think this is going to be a job for no gloves. So let's dump the gloves. It'll be hard enough to do. Okay, so the cam is in. Alright, so we've got just like a loose fit pin in the front of this thing, and when we turn this, you can see that the cam rotates and it raises and lowers that sight. This area right here is the area that was had the damage in it, and the cam was sticking out through it. So we've got springs that are going in underneath the sight to hold it or preload it in the up position, and then the cam, wherever the cam is set, will stop it. The cam has serrations on the outside, and that has a little detent that goes against it to prevent the cam from moving. You know, it's going to be click, click, click. I put some bluing on this thing. It turned out really well. And I found this glow-in-the-dark paint. It's stuff I bought for a site. I don't think it worked too good, but that's what I got. Oh, this stuff is like glue. We'll let that harden up, and then we have to fit the pins. I decided I wanted to push this sight, you know, just check underneath it and take a good look at it. We got it in this Sight Pro sight pusher tool, and we're going to try and push it out of the slide. Oh, here we go. I think most of the time what I've seen is sights are installed from, this is a general rule of thumb, it's not always true, but sights are installed from the right side towards the left and removed from the left side towards the right. The top of this turned out pretty good. I put the bluing on here. You can still see a little bit of the solder, but the solder is what did the repair for that notch for the cam to push up and down. It's yet to be proven. You know, I got to get this thing assembled and find out if all of this is going to work, but the solder looks like it did a pretty good job. Way better than the liquid metal. We got that done. Now we're going to clean this out. I'm going to check the fit of the dovetail here, just to, you know, make sure I got a reasonable fit. Maybe I'll blue the inside. Plus I also have to determine the roll pins that were in here were so tight that the roll pins were, there was one on this side and one on this side, and they go into that front sight leaf. It was so tight to get this thing apart, it was a joke. So I'm going to look at maybe, I take that back, they weren't roll pins, they were dowel pins. So I'm going to take it, maybe see if I got some roll pins that might fit this, that'll, you know, at least you'll be able to get them out without going through this, as crazy as this thing was. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to fit the rear sight base to the slide. So what I did was, just to be sure, I took a hard Arkansas stone and I worked the two dovetails and the base where the sight fits into. And that's just to make sure that there's no burrs in there. Then I also worked the sides of the sight on both sides, front and rear, on the dovetails, just with a hard Arkansas stone to make sure that there's no burrs on that. What you want to see is you want to see the sight be able to slip in by hand about halfway. So once those were cleaned up and I was sure that there was no burrs that would, you know, give me a false reading, the next thing you do is you take the sight and you remove material from the bottom of the dovetail. And the way you do that, you could do it with a stone. I suppose you could do it with a file. The way I do it is I use a lapping plate, a known flat plate, and some sandpaper, weather dry sandpaper. So what we have here is a steel plate. It's been surface ground, and this is some weather dry 220 grit. You know, that's like the coarse stuff to remove most, you know, to get real close. And then once you get down from there, you can go to a 400 or a 600 water dry sandpaper. And you just run figure eights. What you want to do is you want to rotate it, you know, different positions or different orientations, so that you're not pushing down in one specific area and you're trying to remove material from the entire bottom of the sight base evenly. And you just keep doing that a little bit at a time until the sight will install into the slide dovetail approximately halfway by hand. So if you get it halfway by hand like this, that's a pretty good fit. And the rest you want to do, you know, by pressing with the sight press, or some people might do it with a hammer. Not, like I say, most sights are installed from the right side of the gun to the left side. Although I found the Beretta, I think, was opposite. So you want to double check. Now you can see that this will go in a little bit on this side, but it pretty much stops right there. So these sights may have a slight angular to the dovetail. So now that I did all this stoning to this thing, so I'm going to take some blue now and re-blue these areas on this sight so that, you know, it'll match again. I'll probably, these are the two little recesses I made for the springs. They're going to be pushing up on the leaf, and I will probably blue that area as well. Alright, I got this rear sight base fitted, and I took some of the finish off on the front. So I tried some Birchwood KC Super Blue, and it didn't really do much. It didn't do anything, as a matter of fact. I broke out the propane torch, and I took this thing and I, you know, had a piece of wire on it, and I laid some heat on this with a propane torch. It took a little while, but it began to get some color on the front here. I quenched it in water after that, actually soapy water, and then I pulled it out and tried it one more time. I also tried, I forget where I got this stuff. It's CRS Well, black oxide gel. This might have come from Midway, USA. Didn't work. Also tried the Birchwood KC gel. Nope. And I tried Brownell's Oxfo Blue. Nothing. When I put the torch to this, that's what finally got the color into it. And now I noticed that if I use the Birchwood KC Super Blue on top of what the torch did, maybe the torch opened up the pores a little bit. It's actually making it a little bit darker. I've got that on there now. So it looks like we've got this the base has been fitted to the slide. Looks like we got the color in it. So now everything is going to be a trial fit. We're going to get this all cleaned up, get the springs in it and the cam, and see how this works out. Alright, so here we are. We're going to try and put this together. We already got the that center screw is in. I put some non-metallic never sees on it so that it has some lubrication on it. Now this is the cam. I should put some never sees on that. Okay, next there's a miniature detent on this thing. Okay, there's the detent spring right there. And there's the detent. Into that forward hole. And then the spring follows it. Well, the spring appears to be slightly bent, so it does not want to go into the hole. I'm almost wondering how the heck I got it out. Try it one more time. It kind of went in. There's a 50 thousandths key. Oh, it will. Oh, I can feel the detents, so that's a good sign. Alright, we're going to try and assemble this. Clean the holes out in the leaf took the original roll pins and kind of worked them between a stone and a stick, or a stone and another stone, until we got them to pretty much go in. We took some Never Sees, standard nickel base Never Sees, and we coated the inside of the holes of the leaf. Those pins go in to prevent any corrosion that might happen in the future. It looks like we're ready to get going here. We got the springs here. Okay, one spring is in. The cam has already been installed into the sight base. We also used some Never Sees on that. Okay, the spring on the right side is kind of tilted back. It's not the way I want to see it. I might have to take this back apart. Alright, so I found some dental picks. If I can straighten these springs up. Alright, the way I actually got this to finally go together, I got the springs in was this little piece out of 10,000 stainless steel shim stock, and it's the same width as the inside approximately of the sight base. So I got both springs in there, and I came in with this thing and I pushed down on it, compressed the springs all the way down, and because this is only 10,000 stick, I was able to slide the leaf in and down over the cam and then get the front pins in, and then slowly I slid this out through the front, and the springs were stayed compressed the whole time. When this came clear, they just came straight up underneath the leaf. The leaf, if you shine a light on it now, this is really, you can see that I think you can. The leaf is in here, and these they kind of glow in the dark now. And also, I'm gonna have to turn it upside down, but if you put this adjuster in, the cam is rotating the leaf up and down. I don't know if that's showing up here, but that's what's going on. And I got the two springs underneath it, so what's going on here is, I don't know if the springs are going to show up, but they're down in here, and they're underneath each half of that leaf. So they're holding pressure up on the leaf. Plus we have the repair that we did to the top of the leaf with solder. So there was a breakout here, so that's been filled in. So dirt can't get down and affect this cam operation. So far so good. That's what we got. And the next part of the project is to get these pins in, and then we can then install this into the slide on the pistol. I'm gonna maybe put another little coat of some Never Sees in here. Okay, we're gonna grab the one pin. Now, when I initially took the sight apart, I had to make a spacer that went in between that space on the rear leaf. What that was about is it prevented the two leaves from springing in towards one another. One pin is in. Let's go for number two. Second pin is in. Let me see if I can set them just a little bit below flush. Okay, so now they're set in just a little bit below flush. I still have the ratchet. I still have the adjustment. The springs still are pointing straight up, so we're looking pretty good. There you have it. Initially, the rear sight was broken out right here. We repaired that with solder. We double checked to make sure that the base fit into the rear slide approximately halfway. And what we did is we took a stone to the dovetail on the slide, just a hard Arkansas stone, just to make sure that there were no burrs interfering. And then we also took the stone to the face here on the sight base, and also to the rear part of the dovetail. Once we had that, we were sure that there were no burrs interfering, and we went for the fit to get it halfway into the slide. Now, the way you do that is you remove material from the bottom of the dovetail, and we did that with a ground block and some, I think it was 220 sandpaper, water dry sandpaper. You just remove material a little bit at a time until you get this thing halfway into the slide by hand. Once that was done, then we assembled the, we had to take a little bit of material off of these roll pins because they were unbelievably tight. We also drilled a couple of set points for two springs that set underneath this leaf. So what's going on now is the leaf has constant pressure pushing up on it by those two springs. So if there's any slop in the cam slot, your sight, when you're sighting the gun on your target, is always going to be the same, because at rest, before you pull the trigger, the springs are going to to be pushing up on that leaf, and it's going to be held tight against that cam. We assembled the cam and then got the springs in, and we were able to get the rear leaf in with the springs by using this. It's a piece of 10/1000 shim stock. We compressed the springs, slipped the sight in through the cam, down, got everything together, got a temporary pin in the front, and then slid the 10/1000 shim stock out. That kept the springs up, you know, perfectly straight and going into the bottom of the leaf. Also on the bottom of the leaf, we put 2 recesses that those springs kind of seat in, and hopefully, you know, they'll stay in those little recesses. But that's it. That's the repair of this rear sight. It's an MMC sight. I was going to replace it, but then I thought, you know, let me try and keep this all original. Also, we took some glow-in-the-dark type paint, and we put that in because when we did the solder repair, that leaf got warm just from the soldering iron. So we, you know, removed some material. I don't know what was in there, but whatever was in there was old. We put this glow-in-the-dark type paint, and now you've got this sight base, or, you know, rear leaf that it does glow. I have to say that. We did the same thing to the front on the slide. We put some glow-in-the-dark type paint. Same paint on that one. So when this thing is all together and, you know, we get everything pressed in, we'll have a pretty good sight picture. All right, we're getting ready to put this together. So to start with, I'm gonna put some Never Sees. This is the non-metallic Never Sees. And these are the holes, firing pin block, and for the magazine disconnector. I don't know, that might be a little heavy, but it'll wash out. Okay, so here's the parts that were in there. This, I believe, is the firing pin block, and the magazine disconnector is made out of plastic. Okay, this cover plate has a witness mark of where the set screw. Looking at it, it looks like maybe it was towards the rear. You put the springs in, and this is one of the advantages to having it so that it'll go halfway in. You get your springs in, you get the plate in there, and then once everything is in, you can slide the sight halfway in. And once again, this is the disconnector, the magazine disconnector, and the firing pin block. Get the shoes in. I use 2 sticks along each side to protect the slide, and you want the slide to be as far forward as possible. What I'll do is make sure that the pusher is not going to hit the top of the slide. It's just a matter of cranking it in. All I'm trying to do is get the sight centered on the slide. I don't know, looks like maybe it could go back to the right just a touch. Looks like I want to touch too far. Alright, I'll take it back to the right just a hair. Where we're looking here is we're looking along the side of the sight at how much material on this dovetail slot is open to each side. And when I look at that, it's very, very, very close. Since this is where we're at, we're going to leave it right here and see how the gun shoots. Smith & Wesson, the 4566 TSW Tactical. Got the rail on the front end of it. The rear sight was damaged, so we did some work on the rear sight. I do have an LPA sight that's an adjustable sight for this gun, but this is how the gun, you know, arrived, so made repairs to it, put the same stuff back in it. So the gun is back to original. I don't know if somebody set it up this way or Smith had set it up this way for an individual. These TSWs are usually guns that are pretty much made for law enforcement, but you know, I suppose anybody can order one and get it made to whatever they want. I think back then Smith would do something like that. Now not, but okay, we took this 4566, it's a 45 caliber Smith & Wesson to the range after we did the repair on the rear sight leaf. This was the results. Initially we started, let's see, it would be right here, and the group was a little bit low. I think this was 7 to 10 yards, so 21 to 30 feet. The group was a little bit low, so we adjusted the rear sight leaf up, which brought the groups higher. So these were the groups then. This aim point was right here. The impacts were slightly low and to the left. And again, when we were aiming for the bullseye, the impacts were again slightly low and to the left. So elevation, you know, was pretty decent, but to the left, where you would like to get the groups to move over more towards the center. This was another grouping that we did. It seems like I think we did another minor elevation adjustment on this one, and it brought it up a little bit more. What I do see, obviously the gun is clear, is right here where we made this solder repair. I don't know if this is going to show up, but I could see it raising a slight amount. Now what's interesting about this is we put the springs in underneath this, so even though this rear leaf has a little bit of play in it, up and down, that's the slot that the cam rides in, the springs keep it, the cam against the bottom of the slot. So each time you sight, always sighting from the same point, which maintains consistency. And you can see it in the groups that they're consistent. So the springs were a good idea. Evidently the solder, being that we're seeing a raised, very small raised section, I can see right here. I don't know if this is going to show up, but even though we're seeing that raised section in solder, probably if we would have used maybe silver solder, if we would have had to do that with silver solder, the plastic that was in these glow-in-the-dark sights would have really cooked out, and we would have probably had to drill that totally out, and we would have had a mess, and then we would have had to refill that with something. So we're going to kind of see how this goes. One thing that's important is because of the springs, it's consistent, and everything else held together really well. Now for the front, for the fact that we're to the left, what we see is the front sight is drifted to the right of the gun. So by moving the front sight to the left should center up our impact on the bullseye. So that's what we're going to try next, is move that, and then obviously there'll be another range test, and we'll kind of watch and see. But if you're going to try this repair, silver solder or TIG welding would be the way to go. There's going to be quite a bit more work with either of those to make sure the slot is the correct size. With the solder, we actually put a piece of wood in there, and the solder didn't stick to the wood. We cut it to the same width as the groove, and because it didn't stick, we had it was a little bit snug, but we kind of just took a file and cleaned it up a little bit, and we had a real good fit. But now I can see, because you can see this up and down, evidently because of this raised portion, it has loosened up a bit. So once again, but because of the springs, every time you go to aim, you know, you're in a good spot. The next part is to drift or use a sight press to move this front sight over a little bit, go back to the range with it. All right, that's just a little update on this thing. So there you go. All right, we're going to try and tap this over with a drift. In case that doesn't work, we got the sight press. But let me give this a shot, see what happens. Yep, it moved. Do one more tap. It's definitely moved over. So I think what we're going to do is lock it down there and take it to the range. So the front sight did move over with a drift. It's got a wheeler block here, a brass drift, 4-ounce hammer, and this sight is held in by, there's two, I think this is 35,000 set screws. Okay, the set screws are in snug. I don't know if this will show up. So by moving the sight to the left or towards the impact, the front sight towards the impact, it should draw the impact more towards the right or to the center of the target. Next thing is to go back to the range. We'll be good to go with this one. If not, we got an LPA sight for the rear. We can change the rear sight out to an LPA